everyone.
Andy,
Thank you for attending our Thursday, May 6th, 2021, regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen's meeting. We called to order, and I ask that we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Moving on, our next section is our public comment section. This is for people who wish to briefly address the board. We ask that you give your name and that you keep comment at name and address, and that comments be limited to 3 minutes or less. Do we have anybody for public comment? Hearing none. Moving on to our good to know.
Mr. Chairman, we don't have anybody tonight. Seem we have a full agenda for good to know. But before we move on to the agenda, I would make a request, or have you make the request. We've gotten communications from a resident that watches these meetings, and it's hard for them being new to town. And they're asking if whoever speaks could state their name prior to their comments. And they had some trouble with some of the acronyms, if we could explain those more throughout the meeting. So I just want to let that be known.
Okay, great. We will try to do what we can.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I believe, well, there was two things. We had the recognition of past Fire Chief Wallach, and I see where he was given a beautiful clock and a plaque. And he was with us for what, Andy, 8 years as chief?
At least 8 as chief, yes.
Okay. Beautiful. The other
So
thing
Nick is with us here tonight on the call.
Okay, great.
So it's kind of awkward being a not in-person meeting when you have somebody like a chief or department head retire. Time was moving on, so the fire department recognized them. The plaque came in, and knowing we weren't going to be able to be in person tonight, we took a picture and we presented him with his clock. And tonight is the night for the Board of Selectmen to recognize him as selectman for his years of service. So we turn it over to you and Nick.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
Thank you very much for the recognition tonight. I've been in the department for almost 22 years, and it's a great place to be, great group of people to work with. The Selectmen, Board of Finance, also good people to work with. The town hall staff absolutely helped me out in a lot of problem-solving situations having to do with procedures. Andy and Elaine helped us out with budgetary crisis in some cases. Donna Lanza with, she always gets me on the procedural things, and she's very good at what she does. And I thank everybody at the town hall for that. It's been quite an experience, and I'm going to stay in the department for a few more years and serve as I could. I already have assignments from the new chief, so I'll be hitting those, recruitment being the #1 assignment. So that'll be that. And if I miss anything or you need anything, please call me, contact me. And thank you very much.
Okay. This is Dan Larson. I've had the pleasure of knowing Nick since his inception into the fire department. I'm assuming that I may have actually taught him firefighter 1, which kind of tells you how long I've been in the fire department. And it's great to see people come in not knowing if they were going to like it, if they were going to last, and to see people like Nick who have, excelled, gone up through the ranks as a newbie all the way up to the point where he retired as chief. It's been an honor, a pleasure working with Nick, knowing Nick. He and I have been through many changes together, and it was nice to see him being able to take the helm and move the fire department forward to where we are today. So my hat's off to Nick, and I know he is still involved with the fire service, more on the state level. It's great people like that help to make the department the great organization that it is.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Thank you, Nick, and enjoy your retirement. Just remember, you are supposed to enjoy retirement. So, fire departments have a way of kind of sucking you in forever. So again, thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good night.
You too. Okay. Our next thing.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you have a proclamation in front of the Board of Selectmen tonight for, where is it, Childhood Apraxia of Speech. With us tonight, we have Amy Doyle, and it looks like Chris Doyle.
Good day.
I'll turn that over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Would you like to, Ms. Doyle, would you like to kind of explain a little bit about what this affliction is? Sorry, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. Are you on? We can't hear you. Okay. For whatever reason, her microphone is not functioning properly. There are so many things that seem to affect children, and this is one of them. So
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay.
We figured it out.
Good.
So this is Eric. He'll be 6 next month. And we've been through a long road of speech and different therapy. When he was turning 3, he only had a few words that he was able to say. And now he's reading above his grade level, making huge progress. So this is a big deal for us to have you recognize this special day. And we reached out to Dr. Baird, and we're also going to recognize it at both schools and all wear blue on May 14th to show our support.
Okay. So what exactly is this affliction? Can you describe it or explain it?
So it's apraxia. It's more a neurological disorder where the brain and the mouth are not always kind of working together. So it takes a longer time maybe for Eric to think about what he wants to say and to process all of that. He doesn't exactly have control over his oral motor movements. So things take a little bit longer for him to say and to process and to go through.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is
Yes.
Gail. When this came up to us a couple of years ago, I spoke out in favor of it, and I want to do so again. Anything which impacts on a child's ability to interact with their peers, their age cohorts, is damaging to their own ego, their self-esteem, and anything that will get a child up to that point where they can do that, I'm all for.
Thank you, Gail. Dan Larson here. Would you want to read the proclamation?
You asking me that?
Yes, please, Gail.
Okay, I know I have it in this monumental book. Whereas May 14th marks Childhood Apraxia of Speech Day, during which awareness will be raised throughout Connecticut about childhood apraxia of speech, an extremely challenging speech disorder in children. Whereas childhood apraxia of speech causes children to have significant difficulty learning to speak and is among the most severe speech deficits in children. Whereas the act of learning to speak comes effortlessly to most children, those with apraxia endure an incredible and lengthy struggle. Whereas without appropriate speech therapy intervention, children with apraxia are placed at high risk for secondary impacts in reading, writing, spelling, and other school-related skills. Whereas that such primary and secondary impacts diminish future independence and employment opportunities if not resolved or improved. Whereas most children with apraxia of speech will learn to communicate with their very own voices only if they receive early intervention, appropriate, intensive, and frequent speech therapy. Whereas it is imperative that be greater public awareness about childhood apraxia of speech in Connecticut among community members, physicians, educational professionals, policymakers, and elected officials. Whereas funders such as insurance providers, schools, and policymakers are encouraged to recognize the critical need to provide adequate speech therapy and other services so that the impact of this disorder is minimized and so that thousands of affected children can grow into productive, contributing adult citizens. Whereas our highest respect goes to these children as well as their families for their effort, determination, and resilience in the face of such obstacles. And let it be resolved that May 14th is Apraxia, boy, I'm messing up the pronunciation, Apraxia Awareness Day, and citizens of Hebron and surrounds are encouraged to work within their communities to increase awareness and understanding of childhood apraxia of speech.
Thank you very much. So, anybody have anything else to say? What do you think, young sir? This pretty exciting?
Is this a big deal? Yeah. Can you say thank you to everybody? Thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you.
We appreciate your support, so thank you.
You are welcome. Take care. Enjoy. We'll figure out where the camera is. Thank you. Our next is the appointments and resignations. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chairman Larson, there's a couple on here today. The first one, you'll see some motions, when Donna brings that up. Item 6. There's some motions. The first one will be the Salmon River Watershed Partnership Steering Committee appointments. And there's opposed motion there.
Yep. I'll read the motion. We open it up for discussion. Move the Hebron Board of Selectmen to confirm the appointment of Brian O'Connell as the town of Hebron's representative to the Salmon River Watershed Partnership Steering Committee. Knowing Brian has been heavily involved in all forms of conservation, the watershed and all, My personal thought is that there's no question that I feel that this should be moved forward. Anyone other comments?
For clarification, Mr. Chairman,
What's that?
if I could speak for clarification.
Yes, sir.
So Brian was always the representative when he was a selectman. When he stepped down as selectman, we never really formally appointed him as a citizen to be in this position. So this is more of a formality. Brian's been doing it right along, but because we had another appointment to that commission, we felt it was appropriate to do this formally.
Okay. So hearing the motion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. John?
John Collins, aye.
Gail? We read your lips.
Gail Richmond, aye.
And myself, Dan Larson, aye. Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
Okay, thank you. Is Peter on? I believe Peter is not on. So the ayes have it. Next would be the move that the Hebron Board of Selectmen appoint Chris Frey as the Town of Hebron's alternate representative to the Salmon River Watershed Partnership Steering Committee. Open it up for a discussion. Andy, did you want to say anything?
Originally, we had two people that were interested in this position. When Chris Frey's name came available, Ann Zitkus was the other one looking to be considered, and she sent me a letter stating that she thought Chris would do a good job, so she withdrew her request to be considered.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. John?
John Collins, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
And myself, aye. Motion carries. Next is the Commission on Aging appointment.
Excuse me,
Yes,
Chairman.
yes.
Does anybody hear that background noise?
Yes, I do, John.
Does anybody know what it is?
I hear it too.
Okay, I guess it stopped. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Tanya Maurer has expressed interest in moving up from an alternate to a regular member on the Commission of Aging. I know she had been appointed as an alternate a little while ago, not that long ago, but has apparently been very active with the commission and wants to move up. So the motion is that move that the Hebron Board of Selectmen appoint Tanya Maurer as a regular member of the Commission on Aging with a term to run until December 2022. Gail, did you want to say anything?
Yes, as the liaison to Commission on Aging, I'm at the meetings. So I know that Tanya has been attending. She's been an active contributor, and I think she'll be a real asset as a regular member.
Okay, perfect. Anybody else? Any other comments?
She couldn't be with us tonight. She had other plans. It's her birthday, so just to let you know.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, hearing no other comments, I'll ask for a vote. John?
John Collins, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
And myself, Dan Larson, aye. Thank you. Our next thing would be our town manager's report.
Okay, yes, here we go. Donna was showing you something earlier. I was going to bring that up underneath the town manager's report, but I could I could do it now under the town manager's report. Is that the Public Works Department, it's National Public Works Week from May 16th through the 22nd. So on Saturday, May 22nd, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., the Public Works Garage on 550 Old Colchester Road is going to have the construction equipment on display for children to explore and learn the operations of Public Works. They'll be also accepting food donations for the Hebron Interfaith Human Services as they do every year at this time during that program. Please join us. Light refreshments will be provided. So we'll bring this up again at the next Selectmen's meeting, but I just told Kevin I would get that out there. So that was under correspondence. Under the town manager's report, we are busy working with the Small Cities grant for the senior housing down there for upgrades. As you'll see later on this agenda, we have 3 union contracts to hopefully ratify. So we've been busy closing up those negotiations. We finished up the audit. So the audit will be presented to both you and the Board of Finance in the near future for review and comments. We've been working with the Public Building Committee, which is with us tonight, on roof projects, both the library and the schools. We're working and setting up appointments for the new Parks and Recreation Director. That'll be taking place, the first interview is on the 18th of this month. We're working with finance and a couple of constituents on the Rifkin property, trying to get some people interested in possibly partnering with the town and seeking out grants to move that forward for the senior expansion for elderly housing. We had a meeting this week. We're working with CCM, Senator Austin, on the America Recovery Act. I have a meeting with CCM next week on the 18th. They're going to have the guidelines finally, hopefully available. We were hopefully supposed to have them today, but they weren't out. So he's hoping we'll definitely have the meeting next week. And then I'll bring all that information to the Board of Selectmen. But what they said is you don't have to spend the money right away, so don't be in any rush. Make sure we understand the guidelines and the criteria before we move forward with the projects. So we're in good shape there. Working with Parks and Recs and also receiving grants for summer programs and camp fundings, hopefully have no cost to the participants. So the deadlines are very short on that. I think they're due tomorrow. So we've been working with the Parks and Rec committee on that. Believe it or not, we're already starting to close out this fiscal year. So we're starting to wrap that up and tie up loose ends. The library's got a meeting on Monday. They're going to be looking to go back to their regular hours, staying open even later than they are right now as things start to progress. And I'm working on a pretty big project. Don and I and Novus. What this is there's some mandated regulations coming down from the state for body cameras, and the big expense is the storage. It's a lot of money, and we came up with a program that would be a regional program throughout the state. We're hoping that the legislators will pick this up themselves. And the session doesn't end for another month. So hopefully they'll pick this up, but if they don't, we have to go to Plan B. We've developed Plan B. We submitted it to both CCM and Cost today, and they like our plan. And if the state doesn't pick it up, we're going to try to get some grant funding for it. But it's a huge expense just to try to bring it into perspective. It's outrageous. One police officer's data, if we had to buy the equipment and store it, would be like $70,000 per police officer. It's just ridiculous. So we're proactive. I sent it to the head of CCM. I sent it to the head of Cost, and they were very impressed with what we've developed. We have a PowerPoint. We have a pricing. It's more like a pyramid. The more people that get on, if you get 50 towns, it reduces it right down to about $1,000 a year. But we'll have more of that information, but that's been taking up a lot of time trying to be proactive with that, because that's a huge expense to our municipality if it goes through. And then we're actively seeking applications for a new planner for the town of Hebron. Mike has submitted his retirement papers. He's going to be leaving us at the end of next month. So we're going to get, we got that advertised, and we'll see how that goes as well. So we've been pretty busy. And that's all I had for the town manager's report.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next.
I have a question, just a question.
Yes, John.
Really good work on the body cameras, Mr. Kearney. Did the bill last year provide any funding when they required that?
There's two separate stages. So there is funding for the equipment, the body cameras. But what came up later after that legislation is if you were a state trooper town, you could use the state, go to the barracks and dock, and they would download the information from the municipal vehicles or police officers. That has recently changed, and nobody was prepared for that. So the way it's written right now, every municipality would have to go out and buy their own data bank, docking station, and it's huge money. And not only that, just to maintain that is I've never seen anything like this. It's not palatable. It's terrible. Hopefully the legislation comes through and either has a statewide program that we can join in as a regional, or they fund what we need to do, because it's just, I can't believe it.
They should have put a provision in there for towns that have low crime rates.
We've proportioned probably the next meeting we'll present what I have. We have it proportioned by size, police officers, and then that might be another angle of rate of crime.
Well, good idea. Good work.
So Andy, this is Gail. This is another mandate without the funds to back it up.
Yeah, came out with that police accountability bill. This is another part of that they wanted everybody to have the body cams and the car cams, which is somewhat understandable. But in that bill, it was never stated that we were going to have to go out and buy all this IT equipment and have servers in the police stations and then store this amount of data. And then you need a didacting system for the SROs. There's a lot to it. And I'm not really an IT guy, but Don has been great, and Novus has been really good. We put a package together within a week. We sent it up to, the state, but we don't want to take the pressure off of them. We want them to still, plan A is have the state pick this up, but it's coming up pretty quick. So if they don't, we've developed a plan B, and it's been received very well.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mark.
So all kinds of towns have been complaining about this in the police world. And Andy stepped forward and kind of took the lead for everybody to come up with this plan. It was kind of a shock to everybody because the state was going to provide the docking, which is probably the most expensive part, because once you buy the cameras, they're good for years, but you still have to have the handling of it. You still had to buy the server, the docking station. And January 1st, all of a sudden, the state police said, we're not taking any more towns. You can't come over here and unload your information. So that was a shock to everybody, and everybody was just complaining about it. And Andy stepped forward and started uniting everybody, and maybe with this upswell of discontent over it, maybe the state will jump in. Andy, as I understood it a little while ago, and this may not be true, were they still going to give like a grant for a third of it, or is that still up in the air too?
The grant money that's available is for the equipment for the body cameras to be outfitted for the departments. I didn't hear of any grant money yet available for the storage.
Okay, that's how I understood it too. Was it a third of the body camera, 50? I can't remember the exact figure.
It originally was 50 on the very early onsets. Unfortunately, our resident trooper didn't put in for it at that time. So I think it's reduced down to a 38% availability.
All right, thanks, Andy. Good job.
Okay. Never ends. Our next would be our Dale Larson would be our budget update.
Yes, I'm very happy to say the budget passed. We were concerned the day of the referendum because the low turnout, but the results are in, and Donna has the actual numbers posted up on the screen. I don't think, Mr. Chairman, or that I need to read those. I think unless you want to, or I can if I'm asked to.
No, I mean, it's right there. So anybody watching can see it. I think, and how do you word it? I think the saddest thing is, I mean, literally, you're talking approximately, what, 10% of our voting population turned out. I don't know if that means that they're thinking we're all doing a great job, or if there's, they just thought that, this is a decent budget. But I'm taking it that people are happy with the job we're doing.
The turnout was low. The numbers were still show a 2-to-1 in favor. I'm not sure if that says that we're doing a good job and people were content is why they didn't come out, or people, maybe we have to do a better job of getting the information out. That could probably always be the case, but it passed and we can move forward. And those are the numbers. And the 3 towns had all low turnout.
Did you have something, Gail?
The people that I spoke with said, well, I don't need to go out to vote. This budget isn't going to change my taxes by $1. And I got the feeling from different age groups that this basically was, people were content. They didn't see the need to go out to vote. So I still would like to find some way of convincing people to take their responsibility as a voter and come out and vote, even if they're happy with what we're putting out there.
John or Mark?
I would just say it's a disappointing turnout. On the other hand, before I was a selectman, and I'm not sure I voted in all of these, so
Come on, John.
Mark?
It's just another example of people's complacency. Unless they really feel strongly about something, things just happen and go through. So I guess we should be happy it went through on the first vote, because we all kind of agreed that this is what we wanted. So I guess it's a good thing.
This is Gail. I think we need to be thankful it went through on the first vote, because every succeeding vote costs us money, and that's taxpayer dollars.
Dan Larson here. The only thing I would like to interject, I know there are people that did have concerns with certain portions of the budget. I really feel that there are at times seems to be a very big disconnect between the boards of finance and the board of ed, ourselves, and I really think that it would behoove us all before next budget season to try to find a time that we could all sit down in the same room and come up with some goals. I'm just concerned, and I think there needs to be some dialogue. So that's something I would say. And waiting till the budget season is not the time to do it.
Good point, Dan.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Collins.
Yes, sir.
I think it's a great idea. I think, in fact, if we could encourage more, even the appointed boards to start working together somehow on issues, that would be helpful because there's a lot of overlap and yeah, I think it's sometimes stops progress, but no, that's a great idea.
Thank you. Moving on. Actually, I guess it's John, steering committee.
Okay, so thank you. Well, I want to thank the board for a couple of things. So thank you for letting me do this in two parts. Last week I just gotten back from Virginia. 3 minutes before the meeting, I was exhausted. And thank you for having the committee. The committee, I grew up in East Glastonbury, not 10 miles from here, and in the hills. And I've always wondered about, why the demography of the area, why we have that, and how we could, possibly move forward with greater diversity. Hey, Donna, do you have the first slide? So last week we talked about regional demographics, and I stopped at where Hartford was, and I'll just summarize. Hebron is in the hills, in the Eastern Highlands. It's got poor farmland. Was never a destination. It was a rather, I don't think the people that grew up here ever thought they were poor, but it was relatively poor, up until the baby boom generation, and roads came to town, and we became more of a outer suburban community. It was not a destination of choice. Hartford was affected by the Great Migration, as was, all Connecticut and the United States. And there was huge numbers, 6 million African Americans migrated in the 20th century from the south to the north. And Hartford, the population in Hartford of African Americans just exploded from 1920 until 1960. And then in 1960, the Hartford Project came in which the Harvard Project, it was a response to the need for infrastructure, school infrastructure in Hartford, and that's when Project Concern was born. And Project Concern was a huge effort, and it continues to be a huge effort because it's subsequently been Open Choice is part of that now. But Project Concern was a huge thing, and when I grew up in Glastonbury, it was an attempt to provide opportunities to inner city African American kids and others in the suburbs. And there's so many. I always say that it was semi-successful and semi not successful. In the 60s, we always thought that integration would be the key, and education would be the key. And the persistence of the inner city and other problems of racism has, I guess, caused the persistence of what we have, which is an unbalanced demography. So by the 1980s and 90s, you had a robust Black middle class in Hartford. They started to move to the suburbs like every other immigrant group, and but they didn't come to Glastonbury. And Glastonbury, is intermediate to coming to Hebron, and so one of the questions that the group had was, we had this African American middle class that could have moved to Hebron, but it didn't. And were there barriers? Were there racist barriers? Were there unfair barriers that were put in place? And then finally, how can we promote more diversity in Hebron. And so I just want to just back up a little and just say that as we're going on, I think that there's an opportunity, especially with the pandemic economics, that this is a win-win for everybody. That is, that people are fleeing the cities. They are coming to rural suburbs like Hebron for the same values that people have traditionally come here. That is, schools, low crime, and the rural environment. And there are now towns, cities all over the country that are their economic plans now are to attract these home-based people to bring new ideas and new affluence to their town. So a town like Bentonville, Arkansas, I was just reading, is now attracting. Bentonville is where Walmart started, but they are actually giving $10,000 bonuses to people to come to move to their town. And I'm not saying that that's something that we would do, but I'm just saying that in terms of economic development, that is how pandemic has changed things. We are now a destination of choice, and we have this opportunity to attract people of color and other people to our town. Next slide. So yeah, we went through all of the regional demographics, and Hebron is one of the whitest towns in Connecticut, and Marlboro, same, Andover. There is a migration of more Hispanics to our towns, but our African American population actually decreased in the last 10 years. And that's interesting. Why is that? There wasn't a significant population, in the recent years, but even now it's even worse. Over on the right, you see I have affordable housing, because one of the solutions out there is to provide more affordable housing. But I want to also say, within this, for phase one, we separated class and race, and so we dealt with just the basic cut of race. Introducing class into this was beyond us. Phase two, maybe we'll want to tackle that. But question that came up was some of these populations, these percentages are more than 100%. That's because Hispanics can be counted as black or white, and so you can be white and Hispanic, for example. So that's why it's often over 100%. Okay, so next one. So I put a map in there for everybody to see where we are. We are, you would think, fairly close to Hartford, but actually traditionally we've been a remote place because there hasn't been transportation, and also because our economy has been such a small economy. But I often look at Glastonbury as a bell ringer, because when I moved to Glastonbury in 1965, the population was 14,000. It was a rural community, and you can sort of see what they've gone through in the last 50 years, and what they've become more commercial. It's more commercial. They've got more industry. Amazon's just moved. They've just got that Amazon warehouse, but they've also gotten many of the more problems. They have 4 or 5 times the crime rate. They have 40 officers. We have 3 police officers. So with progress, I guess, also comes problems. All right, so next one. So why people don't live here? Our geography, we're far from cities, we're far from metro areas. We have expensive, some of our houses are expensive, although traditionally before the pandemic, our housing stock showed a pretty good range of prices. So not necessarily a barrier. Our taxes are high, and that does serve as a significant barrier for people with moderate incomes. And you'll see that in the survey. We have a lack of infrastructure. There's no public transportation really. Our commercial tax base is below 5%. There are a few jobs, and there are few stores, and that's something that people care about. So there's really not a lot to do. the youngest person of our committee, we talked about why you would move here, and she's like, why would a young person move here? And she's like, I think she said I didn't want to. So that's an issue. Our demographics are, problematic in a lot of ways, but the age demographics are a problem, and our I guess our ethnic and demographics are unbalanced too. All right, so go to the next one. So the possible barriers. So one of the questions is, and in between now and last time we met, Code had Sarah Bronin and a number of other people to talk about zoning, and I was thankful to them because they had statistics about zoning in Hebron, and Desegregate Connecticut now is putting a big push on to change zoning laws. And a couple of things they want is the possibility of additional houses on lots so that you can rent out to people. Hebron actually has that. And then they want more two-family houses. Hebron doesn't have that. Interestingly, Marlborough doesn't allow additional houses, but has multi-family, two-family housing zoning as acceptable. Both places have a lack of diversity. So whether zoning is a long-term or short-term possible solution or changes in zoning, I don't know. I actually have different ideas about that, but there are people on that will probably can state their views on that. So one of the things I really want to know is, was there any overt racism in the town as they went through the annual, as they went through their planning? So, I went back to 1920, 1930 and looked at annual reports and comprehensive plans that were required starting in the 1960s, just to determine the motivation for basic zoning laws. And, there really was no overt evidence that zoning was used to prevent African Americans or people of color from coming here, mainly because the place was so poor. Well, not because, but the place was so poor, and that was not the consideration that people were talking about. Basically, it was more, we're a rural community. If you go back to these annual reports up to 1940, they're putting in line items for pencils. That's how basic it was. 25 cents for pencils. So 1960, you have an explosion of, the population is 2,000. You start having doubling every decade, and the issue becomes, we have all these people coming in. How is that going to change the town? And there's actually in these reports, there's like the planning board is talking about, what if we get 40,000 people into this town? That's what they're thinking about in the late 60s. And so the zoning was kept, at 2 acre outside the commercial zone. They created a commercial zone because they wanted more density. There were studies, significant studies about affordable housing and the need for it, mainly because, the town wanted young people and they wanted that mix of young people. So, I don't want to undervalue or I want people to know that there are many that believe that the predominance of 2 acre zoning lots favors more affluent and older and pretty much more white people. But whether that's a solution, changing the zoning laws, I myself doubt it. Anyways, go on, next. So there are other possible barriers to migration. Redlining in the Hartford area, redlining is well known and established fact. But we interviewed people in the last 20, 30, 40 years. We found no direct evidence of redlining or actually of discrimination. I had a personal conversation with an African-American woman in town who in 1980 was telling me about, microaggressions that, had a significant effect on me. I don't want to underplay that. But, talking with, Judy Padell was on the planning board for 16 years. Mike, Frank Zitkus, who was on the planning board for 22 years. Again, no, and others, no sense of that they, in their interactions, they couldn't think of anything. So, of course, we don't have a lot of African Americans and people of color here, so they may not know. Next. So, we can't really say very much about individual beliefs of the people, because obviously there have been noble acts of people in the past. And, but I mean, we have to acknowledge that people in the town were part of a cultural milieu in the United States that encouraged discrimination against African Americans. And, even scratching the surface, I found advertisements at Gilead Hall in 1907 that use overt and offensive racist language. I haven't provided it because it's that bad. I mean, it's not good. So there was a milieu, and whether that milieu exists for some people still, I think there's a sense of, you talk to most people in town, they will say absolutely not, and that's what the survey says. That their value system is aligned with social justice. But what we're seeing now, and I'll just read this: racism is not always overt and intentional. Racism can sometimes be accidental, that results in a lack of experience and exposure. Responses from people of color in the survey point to anecdotal experiences that made them feel unwelcome. And that's the key here, I think, that if we want diversity, we need to take steps to be more welcoming and to acknowledge or to become more sensitive to what's going on in the world right now. All right, next slide. So we did two surveys. We did a survey of Hebron residents. We did a survey of Hebron teachers. And obviously we got a good age group. We didn't get a lot of young people, but we got 40 and 50. We got a good number of people, 234 people, I think. Most were white because most people in town are white. We did get 0.9% African American in town. It's 0.1%. And we got some Hispanic and Latinx people. I should say, I think they were underrepresented. I think, having gone door to door, and I've said this before, gone door to door in my election, I just think that there's a lot more Latinx people in town that have moved here in the last 10 years. But so happiness with Hebron, people are happy with Hebron. You see that out of 10, the average was 8.0. And and that's what I found going door to door. People love living here. Next. What drew, this is one of the interesting results of the survey. Is this idea of rural setting, close to nature, a value, or is it a defense? It's a value, I think. Almost 80% of people said that they came here because of the natural setting and the rural setting. So that's a value. Schools, you would think schools would be more than anything, but it's actually less than the rural setting. And obviously, the low crime is important. Interestingly, some people found that the affordability of housing was good, but most of those people were older. And I found that also going door to door. People said in the 90s, this place was Hebron was a lot more affordable, and now it's not. So that's interesting. Next. Yeah, so you see this is just a bar chart. Again, most people rated living here 8, 9, or 10. So excellent quality of life. Next. How can it improve? This is interesting. Obviously, we need more businesses and places to shop. That will attract younger people. But, more than 50% said we should have more racial and ethnic diversity. Affordability of housing was up there, especially among the younger groups. And clearly, we don't have transportation or job opportunities. Next. There's not a lot of economic opportunity here. The average score for that does it offer good opportunities? 5. Very few people said 10, and a lot of people were below 5. So average rating 5.2. Hebron offered you good opportunities to get ahead? No. Basically, a 4 for the 40 to 59-year-olds. So that obviously, there's not a lot of jobs here. Next. Public schools, again, we already know people love the schools, and that's why they come here. 8, 9s, and 10s dominated, and the average rating was 8.0. Next. The importance of diversity. Now, this is interesting. For people, how important is it for you and your family to live in a diverse town? The average rating was 5.5. And that's because people said, for them, you know, they felt that that they weren't racist. They didn't look at people from the point of view of race, and that personally, they were not, that was not the important thing. Okay, so, and I'm generalizing there. A lot of other people have scored 10s, but that's a general, you'll see in the comments of what people, that's what a lot of people said. Next. And many people have friends here who are different races or an ethnicity, 45%. However, a lot of people do not, that's 55%. So next. Okay, so here's, again, an interesting story. Children who learn in diverse schools along children with different races, ethnicities, and cultures are better prepared to live and work in a diverse world. Please rank 1 to 10. Well, here now you have a 7.6. You have a tremendous, almost 50% rank that is 10. So the people are saying, well, it may not be important to live in a diverse community for me, but for my children, you know, it's really important for, I guess, a number of reasons. One, because that's how the world is, and for 2, it's just important as a value. Next. So should the local government act to address racial justice? And in this case, we have a number of ratings. There's a dichotomy here, but here we have a significant number of people that say 10. You know, absolutely. You know, so this is over 30% of people said yes, absolutely. It's a 10. We need to do that. Okay, next. Should institutional barriers be examined? The town regulation policy should be examined to identify any barriers preventing people of color. Should we do that? Yes. And that's now up to 50% saying 10. So, and many people rating 7, 8, and 9. So that's something that possibly Board of Selectmen should look at. Next. Support efforts to promote, do you support efforts to promote racial diversity? And here we have 60% of respondents saying yes, and very few saying no. I mean, only 18%. I should say that this was not the people that responded to this. There was a wide array, and anybody that read those comments that I sent out, it's a really good thing to read. I think all the comments, more than half the people gave comments, and this is not a liberal rag here. This was a broad range of views and beliefs. So next. Have you seen discrimination? 20% said yes, 80% said no. You know, I don't know what to make of that, but next. Would you and your family benefit from a more diverse community? And here we say, do you think you and your family would benefit from living in a racially, ethnically diverse community? And here we have 65% saying yes and 35% saying no. So here we had a survey of teachers, and the teachers again kind of mirrored what the town said. And I provided those that live in Hebron and those that live outside of Hebron. And most think that we should increase efforts to increase diversity in our schools. That was 7.3, and they believe children should be taught in a diverse setting, 8.1, and that Hebron schools are probably not doing the best job in preparing students to live in a multicultural world, 5.3. But again, how important is it for you to live in a diverse town? Well, 5.8. People that live outside of Hebron a little bit more at 6.3, but people that live in Hebron 5.0. That to me is an interesting, I don't really know what to make of that, except for, again, I think a lot of people feel like they don't look at race. So next. So given your knowledge of Hebron, what areas do you think Hebron could improve? And the teachers said racial diversity and ethnic diversity. Some said affordability of housing. Most people didn't move to Hebron. Teachers that are out of town haven't moved to Hebron because they're happy where they are. Some said that the taxes and cost of living, but that's a de minimis number, I think 21%. So again, there is a call for more improvement in racial diversity and ethnic diversity. Next. So this is for everybody, not the teachers, but for everybody. Do you think you and your family would benefit from living in a more racial and ethnically diverse community? And again, total 66. Younger people feel the 20 to 39-year-olds are 73%. The 0 to 19%, that's only 3 people, so that's 100%. But a little bit more for younger people, and this kind of reflects, how things go. I think as you get older, I don't know. So here are some of the interesting statements that people made. Here's a white male, 40 to 59 years old, Hebron resident. Having lived in an urban environment for years, I moved to Hebron to get away from that environment. There's nothing stopping any race from moving to Hebron. It's just that humans like to be around people that look and act the same. But we will ignore that obvious inconvenient fact. People like you always come up with the same solution, more low-income housing. My advice to you is to think living in a poor urban community is so great. You're free to go. I did it for years. So I mean that is a a kind of a statement I've heard before, it's unfortunate, I think. But okay, next. So this is a Hispanic teacher, 40 to 59, resident of Hebron for 1 to 5 years. Have you seen discrimination? Yes. Derogatory comments towards Latino. I believe the lack of diversity in our schools make it really hard for the minorities. I believe people are not used to mingling with different socioeconomic people. And it seems like that person should speak for the guy before. White female, 40 to 59, Hebron resident for 10 to 19 years. My husband is an immigrant from Egypt. I was worried when he moved out here, honestly. I grew up and went to school in Hebron. I know the lack of diversity, but honestly, he's been treated well with no issues in town. We hope that continues as our children go through high school in the future. So next, a white, age 40 to 59 resident for 20 to 39 years. I do not recognize race as an issue. Most people are good. I have not experienced a difference between people regardless of race. Most are good. Only a few have convictions that cannot see past color, and I have not had the displeasure of meeting those people. Laws that promote stereotypical behavior must be changed, but laws rarely change people. People change people. So if you see something, say something. People are just people. That is, I think, a very common view in town, I have to say. This is one of the 2 African Americans that responded to the survey, and our Latina member really wanted us to put this in. How high a priority should it be for local government to address racial equity gaps in education, criminal justice, jobs, health, housing, and other areas? Answer 2. So very low. Town regulations should be examined to identify barriers preventing people of color from moving to and living in Hebron. 1. Do you think you and your family would benefit from living in a more racially, ethnically diverse community? No. So there's a diversity of opinion. This person, I think, is attached to a church, and really the value is in that attachment to church. I don't want to minimize what she said, but actually what I really want to do is celebrate that there is a diversity of views amongst people. Next. Hispanic male, 20 to 39, Hebron resident for 1 to 5 years. I think it needs to be done in a manner that doesn't look like a charity effort for inner city citizens, to highlight that the benefits and opportunities it provides for all. To ensure that it doesn't dramatically financially impact current Hebron residents, that's really important. address issues and have a plan in place for the residents that fear crime will become an issue. I think this is a really common view of people that, you know, if we can, if things can be done that are not, I don't want to say revolutionary, but you know, one of the things that people say, and it's true, people's houses are their retirement in the middle class. And, you know, I just saw a quote from Sherry Cantor in West Hartford saying the same thing. You know, we don't have a great social safety net for seniors, and we're all, people are, you know, responsible for their own retirements, and a lot of people have put a lot of their equity is in their houses. So we have to be cognizant of that. Go ahead. American Indian, age 60 to 79, resident for 20 to 39 years. It costs money to live here. If you couldn't have afforded it, I would be living elsewhere. You get what you pay for. End of story. Okay. And then teacher, 0 to 5 years, non-resident. If we are to adopt to a more anti-racist philosophy or curricular goals, it should be done. Should not be done a one-time only kind of change. Many shy away from discussions on race and discrimination because we're not a diverse town. But to me, that means our kids need more exposure to ideas and cultures different than their own. We owe it to our students to help them to see and understand the rich diversity of our nation. Okay, next. White woman, 40 to 59, Hebron resident for 10 to 19 years. It's hilarious to believe that old, affluent white people think town funds and effort should be spent on making themselves feel better about their own prejudice rather than focusing on the actual needs of our town, like more businesses and sustainable infrastructure. Again, not an uncommon view out there, I think. Next. African American, age 40 to 59 years, resident for 1 to 5 years. I do like the small rural town setting, but wish there was more diversity in race and ethnicity and in business, particularly in restaurants. Have you personally felt discriminated against based on your race, ethnicity while in Hebron? This is the saddest statement of the entire survey. Yes, the stares I get from some non-people of color when I'm in town. Okay, next. Asian, age 20 to 39, resident for 0 to 5 years. Hebron is a very, very white, which I'm unhappy about, but glad the committee was created. Hope you are taking into account feedback from people of color. And we are. White woman, age 40 to 59, grew up in Hebron. My husband and I and son are Hispanic. My son has experienced some uncomfortable conversation with students and even some of his close friends regarding race. Very sad that some young adults, not children, have been racist in his presence, knowing he's Hispanic. Next. White male, age 40 to 59, Hebron resident for 20 to 39 years. Hebron is a fantastic town to live in, but it definitely could use more diversity. And I would just want to echo that, both from, you know, you can take it from a social justice point of view, but also from an economic standpoint. We will benefit. Everybody will benefit from diversity. It's just a matter of how we do it. Next. So the findings. You know, African Americans and people of color have been around in Hebron since the founding in 1709. Despite the fact that Hebron's been predominantly white. You know, there are reasons for that. It was never a desirable place to live after 1850. Generally poor and isolated, and didn't really become a destination of choice until road improvement gave access to cities. So some of the reasons for that there's a lack of diversity include geography, lack of jobs, lack of transportation, infrastructure, lack of affordable housing, and possibly the generational impact of redlining, discriminatory lending practices, and high taxes. De facto near segregation, as found in Hebron, often feeds on and perpetuates itself unless efforts are made to change it. While many of it, or most individual white residents can truthfully say they do not discriminate based on race, it's likely that the impact of systemic racism in the United States, created and reinforced over time through physical, structural, and legal barriers, have worked to inhibit people of color from moving to Hebron. It's clear that people move to and stay in Hebron because of its rural character, schools, low crime. At the same time, many express a desire for more diversity. In their neighborhoods, and especially in our schools, it is possible to maintain the elements of Hebron that residents love and achieve greater diversity. In fact, diversity will enhance the richness and vibrancy of our town and spur economic development. which are also goals of many residents and town officials. So the last one to me is a powerful statement. So recommendations. We need to take steps to increase diversity in town. One step could be take more positive attempt to make all citizens feel welcome. To do this, town needs to understand why people of different cultures, races, and ethnicities may not feel comfortable in town, and so would not choose to live here. We suggest that during the next phase, the next committee investigate ways to make Hebron a more welcoming community to everyone, but especially to people of color. I should say, talking with, for example, a Jewish friend that I had, she said when she came to town, she was looking to see, gauge it. She went to the synagogue. I talked to an English guy who came to town, and he said the same thing. It's not, he felt it took years for him to really be integrated in the community. And it behooves us to facilitate and catalyze that, make people feel welcome. It will differentiate us. That's one of the things that in terms of economic development, what differentiates you? And we have many good things. Our schools, our trails, our open space that people are going to love. But if we make an effort to welcome people, that's like a sales program. Okay, the town leadership program We Are Hebron should be expanded to include training of Hebron ambassadors to greet new arrivals into Hebron, to act as mentors, make introductions, generally make new residents feel at home. So, I was talking to the head of the NAACP, and she was saying, even the smallest things like introducing new people, when people of color move to Hebron, introduce them to the police. We don't have very many, so it's a very simple thing to do, and it could have a lot of benefits. We could do that for everybody. That probably would be helpful for everybody. But okay, so the Hebron Economic Development Committee will be giving out a $30,000 contract to a consultant to advise encouraging economic growth in Hebron. More diversity will fuel economic development. As such, Hebron Board of Selectmen should consider diversity in selecting this consultant and setting goals for their work. New economic initiatives should include initiatives aimed toward people of color, such as Why Not Hebron? So we have a planning director that we'll be hiring. I hope people of color are considered, or well, obviously they will be. I think getting back to one of the original points I made in the beginning of this about the pandemic has changed everything, and we have an opportunity to really take what's good about Hebron and to make it even better. People are coming here. The housing prices, anybody that's selling a house, I'm selling some of my houses, and it's wild out there. They're selling houses now because people are coming here, and we can attract, all sorts of people of talent, people that have special skills, people that can help the community, and increase diversity. And I just, take a page from Bentonville, Arkansas, the home of Walmart. That's what they're doing, and they're smart. Hebron Board of Selectmen should consider including increasing diversity as a goal of the town, and resources that should be directed towards encouraging more people of color live in town. Proposed resolutions should include such as racism and public health crisis, which has been found to be a true statement by many health organizations. Health organizations should be adopted because they show a willingness to understand and appreciate the negative impacts of systemic racism on people of color. So what a statement that would be if we as a board said that this is an important thing for us. Diversity is important. We recognize we are not a diverse town, and we're going to take steps. It would be a huge statement. Next.
That's it.
Respondents thought that diversity was important in schools. I leave it to the school board to handle this, but we should recommend that we find ways to increase diversity in Hebron schools. So the next thing is affordable housing. People have talked about this. We recognize the Hebron Board of Selectmen recently endorsed a resolution calling for more affordable housing in Hebron. However, Hebron does not meet the state requirement that 10% of its housing is affordable. We're at 3.1%. Both our conservation and development plan and study of incentive housing zones recommended the need for and strategies to increase our affordable mixed income and mixed use development in certain areas of town. Respondents to our community survey mentioned the need for affordable housing as a way to improve Hebron. Therefore, during the next phase, the committee should research the barriers and pursue strategies to reach those goals. The creation of affordable mixed income housing does not guarantee greater integration will occur, but since people of color in Connecticut earn considerably less than whites in America and have been held back by discriminatory policies in housing, zoning, and lending statewide, it would give them more opportunity to move here if they so choose. It would also enable many more young people and those earning less than the current housing in Hebron requires to move here, adding to our vibrancy and boosting our economic development. So I should say that we talked, to developers, and there's a recognition that, to bring in affordable housing is an economic issue as well as, just not just wanting it. I see the state, I see with, Biden and the state, there's going to be funds for more affordable housing. And, what studies have shown is that, multifamily housing does not decrease housing values and could increase the vibrancy, especially of our downtown. So that's the thinking behind that. Okay, so the town should work with local organizations such as CODE, community conversations, and other efforts to increase community awareness of issues around diversity. The town should consider creating a Facebook page to share information about diversity, equity, inclusion, resources, events, and articles. And here's the last one. One of the deficiencies of our study is that we couldn't or didn't have the bandwidth to talk to other towns, like Wyndham or more diverse towns, and survey why they haven't come to or haven't considered coming to Hebron, and what we can do, to become more attractive to people of color. So Hebron should reach out to other towns, cities in the area with larger non-white populations, survey why African Americans and other people of color in these adjacent or nearby towns are not moving to Hebron. Anecdotally, there are many or maybe hundreds of people of color that travel through Hebron daily on their way to work elsewhere. Clearly, Hebron is closer to their work than where they live. Why not Hebron? And that is the end of it. So thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. I know it was long, but.
Thank you very much. Have anybody have any comments? Okay, thank you again.
I do quickly, Dan.
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, John, for putting all that work in. The committee put a lot of work in. It's to be commendable when people do things without getting paid and volunteer to provide a service for everybody. So it's thank you, John, and thank you, the committee.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to keep this on old business and maybe cogitate on what the next steps could be in next meeting. Possibly propose something for consideration.
I know there is some discussion taking place actually for a committee, but so sure, we can keep it on old business. Any other old business? Or Andy, did you have something?
No, I'm good. Good job.
Okay. So any other old business? Hearing none, new business?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we do have another presentation tonight. I felt very appropriate due to the project and the amount of money that it's looking to cost. So without further ado, I think we have most members of the Public Building Committee with us. They've done a thorough investigation of the roof and they have a proposal on how to move forward. So without further delays, I'll turn it over to Richard Steiner.
Well, before Richard gets started, Andy, I'd like to just say a few words on this. I've heard comments among residents, among elected officials that how can a roof project be so expensive? Well, I think we've got to change the perception of what's going on there. This is far more than a roof project. This is to correct things that were done wrong, that weren't done, or that were done poorly when the building was built. So this is a renovation as well as a roof project. So if you keep that in mind, I think things will become a lot clearer. This committee is made up of 4 people. We've got a couple of, well, Richard is a current professional working in the construction trades. He manages huge projects. David is with us also. David Foster is a retired architect. Wayne Warwick, who couldn't make it tonight, is our chairman and also a retired engineer. And I'm there to control the money. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to the person that really knows something about it, Richard.
Hi, Auntie Dolly. I'm sorry I haven't been in touch in a while. Weird shit's been going down around here, and I just didn't know what to make of it. But
For the record, Richard Steiner, 330 West Street. I'm a member of the Hebron Public Building Committee. The acronym for the record is PBC. Back in October of 2020, this past fall, Andy contacted the committee and asked if we would go take a look at the existing roof condition at the library. It was very obvious of some of the conditions. Donna, next slide. Donna, some of the things that we observed were very obvious, and some of the things took us a while to discern. First item was missing shingles. Next slide, Donna. And simply the missing shingles were as a result of the roof being in excess of 20 years old, and also the fact of what the shingles are attached to. Next slide. The most obvious thing that everybody has commented on is the buckled shingles, or the waffling, or the waving of the shingles, which was one of the things that we were determined as a public building committee to try and figure out what was going on, what was causing it. Was it the shingles, or was it the substrate underneath it? And as we continue to look, one of the things that we noticed, next slide, was a lack of soffit vents. Dave, Mal, Wayne, and myself, we walked and walked. One of the important things for a shingled roof is that there's always a circulation of air from the low part of the roof up to the vent, or the peak. We did see that there were ridge vents, both in the original library and the new construction, but we did not see soffit vents. Next slide, please. The other thing that we saw, Mel talked about this, preponderance of rotted fascia and trim boards. And this was simply as a result of a not such a great design. As you can see in this picture, the gutter, the edge of the gutter falls short of the shingles. When the water or snow builds up, it just sits there and deteriorates not only the fascia, but also the structural members behind it. And the last thing we noticed throughout the building was several locations where there was a missing aluminum trim underneath some windows or above some windows. Next slide. As we began to look at this, we saw that it wasn't just simply a task of ripping off the existing shingles, putting new shingles in, and maybe ripping out some rotted wood. One of the first things we did is we consulted with our building official, Randy Blaze, to find out what he was going to require as far as the project proceeding for restoration. And two things that are mandated by code. The first thing is that there needs to be architectural drawings that are generated and they need to be sealed. In addition to which, there needs to be an engineering qualification that clearly identifies whatever's going to happen with the restoration of the roof at the Douglas Library, that the existing structural members are strong enough to support the new roofing system and a maximum snow load. Those things right there requires bringing a professional. And with the approval of the town and the Board of Selectmen, we did retain our BPD roof consultants to kind of vet out more things that we hadn't seen as the Public Building Committee. One of the things that they brought to our attention when we were all there with them performing the investigation, in the original 1898 library building, there was a ridge vent installed at the peak of the roof, but not in 1898 and not in the restoration in 1993 was the roof deck cut back. So effectively, not only did that section of the library not have soffit vents, it did not have functioning ridge vents. They were just there for decoration. Next slide. And then we kind of started looking at the 1998 library edition. Ridge vents were installed and they appear to be functioning, but without soffit vents, that's a real issue. The thing that really creates a problem with the roof is that underneath the roof, underneath the structure, it's totally enclosed with fire-rated sheetrock. So particularly from May to October, where we have really hot weather, the heat builds up underneath that roof membrane, underneath the homosote, and just cooks the wood, cooks the homosote, and creates just absolute havoc and accelerates deterioration of the shingles. Again, that kind of explains why we have missing and buckled shingles. The buckled shingles are probably twofold issue. One, their age, and also the fact that the homosote substrate underneath it, which is not like plywood, it's more of a composite material, not really structural, has been baked over the last 20 some odd years with tremendous amount of heat and lack of air ventilation and humidity. The other thing that the roofing consultant identified is that, and we saw that picture, is there's an improper gutter design that will need to be addressed during the restoration project. There's several areas without aluminum starter strips, both definitely along the drip edge, along the bottom of the roofs, that has to get restored. And the thing that really makes this project very complex is that in a typical residential home or typical roof where there are shingles or a membrane roof, there is usually a plywood substrate. At the Douglas Library and on the edition, the 1998 edition, there is a homosote deck. It's like a composite material. It's made out of a fibrous wood membrane, but it really is really not a structural material per se. The concern with the homosote is they can be reused, but the removal of the shingles needs to be done in a very, very careful and methodical process, where the amount of damage that's done to it really needs to be minimized by the re-roofing contractor. Next slide. I really wanted to find out whether the original 1998 drawings showed the soffit vent or did not. Donna was able to dig out the drawings. And in fact, the contract drawings did show ridge vents, both in the original library section and in the new edition. I also looked at all the change orders to see if somehow there was value engineering to delete them, to possibly, that they weren't necessary. I looked at all the change orders, and there was no discussion or no credit. So it obviously was called for in the drawings. It was missed by the architect and the clerk of the works, who should have been critiquing the general contractor's work. It's unfortunate. They're going to be required. They're going to have to be cut in, and both the newer edition of the library and the original construction. Now, Mal mentioned the scope of work is just not a simple re-roofing project. The drawings need to address the missing soffit vents. In the new edition, the 1998 edition, that's easy. Where it becomes really complex is installing soffit vents in the existing original library. Right now, there's a mechanical piece of equipment that has piping to it. Soffit vents absolutely positively have to be introduced into that attic space, but the real design is how do we introduce them, keep the air movement underneath that roof deck and not compromise the operation of the rooftop unit. That is going to take a little bit of study and design work by the roofing designer. Again, improper gutter designs have got to be addressed. There has to be strong and definitive language, as I mentioned, how the shingles are going to be removed to minimize the damage to the homosote. We even talked, as the project advances to the construction, where the design professional needs to be there observing the roofing contractor so they don't force the town into a situation of having to replace homosote because they said it was damaged when in fact they were being too aggressive in removal of shingles. We also need to have the scope of work clearly identify how we're going to maintain the safe operation of the library so staff and patrons can enter, do what they need to do in the library and leave and not feel as though that they're walking into a construction zone. And there needs to be language on how to minimize the disruptions to the library. And there'll be close coordination between library staff and how the bid packages are crafted, where dumpsters go and things of that nature. Bid documents need to identify plans and specifications for all new material that's going to be installed so that the bids are plans and specs and there is no loose items. There needs to be a construction schedule that binds the roofing contractor. This is when you're going to start and this is when you're going to finish. The bid documents also need to include a multitude of unit prices. One of the most important one is that we know that there's going to be some homosote. That is no fault of the roofing contractor that's going to need to be removed and replaced. We want to buy unit prices on that, so we're not doing that type of work on time and material, and we're having people having to sign tickets. Later in the presentation, I'll talk about the various options that the roofing consultant came up with, but we're really focusing as a committee on getting the work done the most cost-effective way, and that is option C. There will be two other alternates that we bid. It would be option B and option A. I'll talk a little bit more about what the differences on those three are later in this presentation. But most importantly, although there were two roof cuts that were made, the one thing that the roofing consultant cautioned us as the public building committee is they're unknowns. The areas where they did do roof cuts, the homosote looked okay, looked salvageable. But the real issue is on a building that big with all of that roof surface, what did he uncover in those two roof cuts? And we want to be optimistic. We want to, prepare for the best, but we want to also be prepared for anything that might be hidden. Again, we want to make sure that their shingles are removed properly and that there'll be additional oversight during that phase. And in addition to which, when the new design changes are implemented, that there's somebody on site really watching after the contractor to make sure this time things are done absolutely by plans and specifications. As I mentioned, there were three options. Option C is the more conservative one that we as a committee really want to try and bring the project in But option A is the more dramatic one that we really strongly believe the town should fund for. But we're hoping that we can again bring the project in under option C. Option C is this general scope of work, without going into a long list of materials, is effectively removing the shingles, applying a 1/2-inch layer of plywood on top of the homosote, and securely nailing it to the roof structure. That would get rid of the waffling that we now see on the roof of the Douglas Library. That is the most conservative one. Option B is similar, except a 1-by would be nailed and cleated to the roof joist, and then the plywood would be laid over it. That would be a function of if we pull the shingles and find the homosote is so waffled that it would be time consuming to kind of start to shim the waves down. The more dramatic option is option A, where we start to pull the shingles and determine the homosote is not salvageable. It's structurally compromised with all of the heat and humidity buildup over 22 years, that it's now just disintegrating. That's option A, which is the most expensive. We're hoping we're not going to have to pursue that avenue. That is literally ripping all the homosote down and putting 2 layers of plywood on top of the roof structure. In order to support these, we asked our roofing consultant, you've generated numbers. We really, with Dave being an architect, myself being in construction, so I want to see how you came together, how you put these numbers together. And there were like 3 different estimates. One, there is a flat roof that is incorporated in all 3 options, option A, B, and C. There's a small section where all the mechanical equipment is located on the roof of the Douglas Library. That has to get replaced. That's part of all of the other options. And then option A, B, and C, or C, B, and A, is his detailed estimate. Dave and I went through those, and we're very comfortable with those costs. We think that they're couched in current cost for the particular scope of work. Donna, we can skip option B and A. The next step would be to commission BPD roof consultants to begin on pulling together the bid documents in preparation of going out to bid. I know we shared with Andy their cost proposal is $45,000. It's in those numbers. So that's where we see the next step. We now know what the issues are. We now have a pathway on how to address them at the Douglas Library. The next step would be to produce bid documents. So Mal, myself, and Dave are more than willing to take questions from the Board of Selectmen.
Before we go into question and answer, I'd like to just make one thing clear on the slide that showed the 3 options, and it said that right there, option C was the one to be bid. We don't want to say, oh, we're willing to replace all this stuff if we don't have to. However, the only responsible thing to do is to ask the town to approve funding, not saying we're going to spend it, but to approve funding up to the level of option A. This is similar to, similar but a little different to the project that we finished this summer at the school, where the town funded or approved funding for $2.1 million. In the end, it's going to cost the town, about $650,000, because over half of it was picked up by the state, and that money that was put in there also covered almost $100,000 in unforeseen issues that the fire marshal found from previous projects, and I won't take you through that. I think you're all familiar with that. So you see a big difference, $180,000, $170,000 between option C and option A. Our intent is to spend option C amounts. But in case find, as Richard said, there's a lot that is undiscovered. In case we find some bad stuff, there is money there to do it. And of course, our goal is to keep any changes to a minimum. So I just wanted to make sure, because I know there was going to be a question on why are you bidding one amount or bidding one option at this amount, but you want more money, approval of more money. So thank you.
Mel, it was 1.2, right? Not 2.1, right, for the school? We approved 2.1.
It was 2.1.
Was it?
Yeah, that was the architect's
Estimate. Okay, all right. So, Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I have a couple of questions?
Okay.
What's the square footage of the library? Anybody know?
Can tell you the roof square footage is 317,000. It's 317 squares. A square is 100 square feet.
Yeah. Is the library more than 4,000 square feet, do you think?
Yes.
6,000 square feet?
Yeah, I bet you. Bet you it's
My
up there.
memory this is Gail, my memory might not be quite right, but I thought from all the work I've done at the library that we were talking 16,000 square feet.
16,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to remember there's 3 floors there, John. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's the lower level, which is partially below ground, the main level where if you go to the library, you take your books out, and then the top where mamas bring their little children.
I feel like this is one of my favorite movies is The Money Pit, and I'm concerned that this isn't the end of it. If it was smaller, I'd say consider demolishing it and building something else for $600,000 bucks. But I don't know. Boy, that's a lot of money.
Too big, John.
Yeah, I guess so.
And the rest of the library is solid, so.
Hope so. Is the rest of the library solid?
Yes.
Well, once we complete the new HVAC system, the electricity's been or all the fixtures have been upgraded. I think the only thing we have left to do, Gail, is to put a carpet in the basement or a new floor on the ground level.
The flooring is being done in stages, so that's all been approved.
Yeah.
It looks very good downstairs in the lower level, the community room and the like. Really looks good.
Good. So I think the answer to your question is, if it's not today, the plans are in place and funding is in place, with the exception of what we're before you tonight on, that it should be sound. The structure and the facility should be sound.
John, to answer your
Richard?
question, the surface of the roof is 107,000 square feet. There's 107 or 110 squares, as Mel said, so it's like 107,000 square feet of shingle area.
Didn't they have the shingles at 317 units?
That was the cost, probably, but
Sorry. Yeah.
the square footage was 107,000 square feet.
Hey, Richard, it's Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Richard, you think, in your experience, don't you think it would be good to use the Advantech zip system and get that whole surface watertight without any membrane over it? And then when you're building it, you wouldn't have to worry about it leaking because that can stay out in the weather for up to 6 months. That was one question. Is a half inch on the roof, that's code? I thought it was 5/8 on 16 on center is a better roof load.
I know that
Go ahead, Rich.
Go ahead, Mel.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I know that there was discussion between our roof consultant and Randy Blaze. And so I know that whatever thickness of plywood he's recommending is not only meets code, but more importantly, not only meet code, but also will also support the structural load of what the numbers need to show for a roof in Hebron with snow on it.
And you also have to take into consideration, which we didn't put in the presentation, but the man hours that are going to be involved. If we change the thickness of the substrate, all the siding has to come, not all, the lower siding has to come off all the dormers. If we change the thickness of the substrate, it has to all be recut, and it has to come off to begin with, just so they can do the proper flashing. So there's a lot of man out. There's a lot of dormers on that building.
Yeah.
You know, that also drives the cost.
The other thing that drives the. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Richard.
Well, the other thing that drives the cost, and Mel kind of inferred it, is the slope of the roof. The slope of the roof of the Douglas Library is really high. It's not a subtle roof, and production is going to be a lot slower, ripping those shingles off, and production of putting new shingles on is going to be slow. So those are all the factors that kind of add on or increase the cost of this project.
And I
Gotcha.
think if you take a look at
It's a 12 pitch, Richard?
Yes.
It's a 12?
Yeah.
So when they vent the soffits, I don't know, it doesn't seem as complicated. Why don't you just rip the bottom of the soffit off, put the core vent in there, and then fill it in with soffit material? I mean, like John said, it does, having done this myself, it does, and I know there's a lot of work to it, Richard, and I know you're being as judicious as you can and trying to save money. It does seem a lot for some of those parts of the construction.
Mark, you have to remember, this is because the project is going to be more than $100,000. The labor is prevailing wage. The average wage, I believe, and if you look in the Donna, does the Board of Selectmen have the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. If you look in the details, you'll see a couple of things. You'll see that that roof has to be staged. There's a lot of money in there for staging.
Gotcha.
And there's also, because it's going to be more than $100,000, it has to be paid at prevailing wage, which I think the average prevailing wage is, I think it was like $95 an hour.
I think the net cost before markup, if you look at the estimates, it's around $88.
Okay. Now I kind of get it a little more, Richard. I was figuring somewhere around 55, 58, but okay.
Mark, just to answer your question, because we, as a committee, we really kind of drilled down in the weeds, and to answer one of your questions about the soffit vents, because that's actually a couple of the points that we made with the roof consultant. Just rip off, and put. What we found is, to make matters worse, as far as having to cut the soffit vent in, that the substrate underneath it is solid wood blocking. So we not only got to rip the horizontal siding down, but the roofer's going to have to go in and cut right through the plywood substrate that was installed. There is no slot there, so that's going to have to get cut open. Then he's got to install the prop vent, and then reinstall the siding. So as we started to drill through this, there isn't anything that's simple as far as this project goes. And I think that's one of the things that we try to highlight in our in our presentation, one of the bullet points. Unfortunately, this is not just a simple roof restoration project. Everything from the soffit vents to even cutting open the roof at the existing library to where the ridge vent's sitting there and doing nothing. Everything is a challenge on this job.
Wow,
And
Richard.
unfortunately, because it's a challenge, it's costly.
So they didn't leave the rafter bays open and put baffles in for the air to go up to the ridge vent, which wasn't working anyway?
They did that in the new edition, the 1998 edition, but the original library, which was part of the restoration work, they just closed up that peak with lumber, with plywood or boards, and the vent at the top of the roof of the existing library is totally closed.
Oh, good luck, Richard. You must be really frustrated examining how that thing was built.
Well, we really wanted to kind of drill in because, as Andy told our committee in mid-October, a lot of people have looked at that building. He's gotten, the town's gotten a lot of information about what the causes were and what the cures were. And we really felt that we needed to kind of, even an independent of bringing the roofing consultant, we really needed to kind of dig in and vet some of the things out ourselves as far as having understanding of what was going on with that roof. What was right and what was not right.
Nobody.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. I won't belabor the point anymore. Thank you.
Mark, nobody prior to us getting involved had mentioned anything about poor ventilation, even though, I mean, you've built buildings, I've built buildings, you see shingles that are all ruffled and, it's probably heat and
moisture, right?
And moisture or lack of ventilation. Yeah. And, so that was one of the first things that our group asked the question, why? And of course, if you don't have any vents at the soffit, doesn't mean what you have. It doesn't matter what you have at the ridge. Air will not flow.
Right.
So.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Dan Larson, just a couple quick questions. One, do these prices include the rapid dollar increase in raw materials, i.e. plywood? And I'm not sure about shingles, but I know plywood has just skyrocketed in price. Do these prices take into account any of those material increases that is being seen in construction?
Dan, the pricing that the roofing consultant put together are based on today's numbers. And he did include in the number a forecasted escalation for labor and materials.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. It's infrastructure. We have to do it. It's our building. So I'm glad somebody's taken the time to study it rather than just, put the lipstick on it and walk away syndrome. So again, I thank the building committee for, really being able to delve into this and actually get down to some of the root causes. So thank you very, very much.
Welcome.
For the entire Board of Selectmen, our job won't end with getting this thing bid. And by the way, the time frame looks like we can get the design done probably by end of the summer, early fall, be prepared to go out to bid. With any luck, we could do it this fall, but more likely it would be done. We would bid in the fall, get the best pricing available, and then do the roof next spring. I know, Gail, another year, but at least we're moving forward this time. And our job.
It's been a long time, Mal.
Yeah, we will. We will manage this project the same way we managed the elementary school through the construction phase and the rapid or the wrap up phase. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Quick questions. Yeah, thank you very much, Mal, Richard, David, and others. So Richard, when you mentioned the escalation, was that escalation estimate from the contractor in correlation to our anticipated time frame, or did the contractor put like a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month in terms of those escalation costs or estimates?
Well, candidly, the picture that we painted, the roof consultant, we put his numbers together, was based on the scenario that Mal just painted. We said, let's be realistic. We know that we've got to make a presentation to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance. We've got a lot of people that we've got to convince that the dollars make sense. So let's forecast that. Here's the time frame. So the numbers that was absolutely was based on that type frame of even going out to bid late fall and even not starting the work until next spring.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
So, Mr. Chairman and the Board of Selectmen, what I would propose next step be is I work closely with the building committee and the consultant to develop an RFP, and we'll come back. We'll also have to make a presentation to the Board of Finance, similar to what you had tonight, get their take on it, and we will look at existing funding that we have for this and see what we have to obtain and how we're going to obtain that for additional funding. So I'll keep you posted. We'll keep this on the agenda as an item to keep the Board of Selectmen abreast of the costs and any approvals necessary.
Dan Larson, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Also, we can investigate whether there's any other grant opportunities for this type of work. So hopefully we can get it pulled together, and it'd be great to try to get some sort of progress, literally definitely prior to fall, prior to bad weather. But okay. Anybody have any other questions, comments? Thank you. My hat's off to the building committee. Another job, fine job, well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I believe, is our request to waive permit fees for the 2021 Hebron Fair.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Board of Selectmen, attached is a request from the Hebron Lions requesting a waiver of the fees for the Hebron Harvest Fair. Attached is a copy of the permit application form, reflection of a total value of projects about $70,000, which the fee waiver request total is about $840. We, in the past, have consistently done this as a town and as a board. So it's in front of you again tonight. They are moving forward this year with the Hebron Harvest Fair.
Okay, I'll read the resolution, then we'll open it up for discussion. Be it resolved by the Hebron Board of Selectmen, approve the Hebron Lions Club request for waiver of the permit fees associated with the 2021 Hebron Harvest Fair in accordance with Hebron Town Code Chapter 200 Fees, Section 200-2 Waiver of Fees. So hearing the ordinance, or the resolution rather, open it up to the floor. Well, I'll start then. I personally feel the Hebron Lions Club has been an incredible partner in promoting Hebron and doing things to help to promote Hebron. And that coupled again with the fact that they have helped us, the town crew, the town yard, by helping us to store equipment, and the fact of COVID, I see no reason why not to accept this with open arms. What we're going to get from the fair and from the goodwill far and exceeds this dollar amount.
Mr. Chairman?
This is Gail.
Yes, Peter.
I concur with that. And I think we have to, some of the things they helped because we could not have a regular high school graduation last June, they helped with that with a graduation parade, I guess you'd call it, of cars. And they've done many other things. So I'm very much in favor of us continuing to do this.
Thank you. Peter?
I just was going to echo the comments that you both have made, which is the Hebron Lions have been historically a wonderful community partner. So I think this is absolutely makes perfect sense. So I support the resolution as well.
Mr. Chairman, they're
Yes, Mark.
also spending $5,000 on a tent to have the junior prom at the Lions Fairgrounds too. So the school doesn't have to incur that cost. The senior prom, I'm sorry, they're having their senior prom on, I believe June 5th or 7th, and they're paying for everything to have the kids come up there.
Incredible. That's great. John?
No, let's move the question.
Okay. So hearing the resolution, all in favor, going down the line, John?
John Collins, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
Peter?
Peter Casper, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
And myself, Dan Larson, aye. Thank you. Any other, well, actually, our draft agenda would be the next thing, which is in your packets. So like always, if you have anything that needs to be discussed, added, or what have you, get it in. Any other new business? Okay, hearing none. Move on to our consent agenda. And these are items that could be considered routine in nature, which the board may or may not need to discuss individually and may be voted on as a group. Any board member who wishes to discuss a particular item in this section may request the chair to remove it for later discussion, a separate vote if necessary. So we have our April 15th, 2021 regular meeting, and then we have our tax refunds as listed. Anybody want anything broken out or corrections, additions, deletions? Okay, hearing none. Move for that for approval as stated. John?
John Collins, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
Peter?
Peter Casper, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
And myself, Dan Larson, aye. Next would be our liaison reports, starting from the top. Mark?
It's been a long meeting. There's nothing really of importance to share with you.
Okay, Gail?
I do have some items, but I think, like Mark, we could forego that and leave it on the next one because it's late.
Okay, Peter?
I'm fine that my updates aren't substantive, so I can delay any discussion until the next meeting.
Okay, John?
Same.
And myself, same. Moving on, any other public comment? And again, the process would be to put into the chat box those people who wish to do public comment.
We do
Anything
have,
for
we have one comment here from Ann Zitkis that I'll read.
Okay,
Not sure if she's still here with us, but Ann Zitkis, thank you very much, John, and the whole steering committee for this thoughtful study and presentation attempting to address serious societal problems.
okay.
And
None others?
there are no others.
Okay, hearing that, make a move that we go into executive session. This is for the Town of Hebron bargaining union contract negotiations. I guess we would invite in Andy and anyone else, Andy
Yeah, Donna.
and Donna, okay. So with that, we will move into executive session. Donna, do you have a speech that you tell the
Sure.
listeners?
So at this time, we're asking all of our guests to leave the meeting. The meeting will be locked, the recording will stop, and after the executive session is over, the selectmen will come out of executive session and may take some action. At that time, you can re-enter the meeting if you'd like to sign back in. At this time, if all guests could please leave the meeting. Thank you. And then just give me a minute to stop the recording and.
Okay,
get
well,
the
we'll wait for your all clear.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so back in our standard meeting. So we have 3 proposed motions. The first would be to move that the Hebron Board of Selectmen approve the contract between the Town of Hebron and the Hebron Town Hall Employees Union Local 1303-217 of Council 4, AFS-CME, AFL-CIO, July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024. So motion to accept would be a yay. So going across, John?
John Collins, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
Peter Casper?
Peter Casper, aye.
And myself, Dan Larson, aye. Proposed motion, Public Works Union contract. Move that the Hebron Board of Selectmen approve the contract between the Town of Hebron and Hebron Town Department of Public Works Local 1303-372 of Council 4, AFS-CME, ALF-CIO, July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024. John?
Just it's AFL, but that's John Collins, aye.
That's what I'm looking going, okay, I'm reading it as it's written. Thank you for that correction. So with that correction of it being AFL-CIO, John?
John Collins, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
Peter? You're on mute.
Peter Casper, aye.
And myself, Dan Larson. Proposed motion, Supervisors Union contract reopener for wages. Move the Hebron Board of Selectmen approve the reopener for general wage increase only for the contract between the Town of Hebron and the Hebron Town Supervisors Union Local 818-57 AFS-CME Council for June 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. And that date is correct? Just
Yes.
Okay. John?
John Collins, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
Peter?
Peter Casper, aye.
And myself, Dan Larson, aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think with that ends our actions tonight. I thank everyone. Roughly not even 9:29. Got out of here before 9:30.
This is Gail. I'll make a motion that we adjourn at 9:29.
Thank you. Everyone have a great evening and great weekend.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get some
Good night.
weather.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Night.
Night,
Good night.
Donna.
Thank you, Donna.
Good night. Thank you, Donna, and